The famous original slider, White Castle's iconic mini burger, and its influence. The burger is the one that's so small. It's a White Castle original slider. For more than a century, this little burger has been an important part of American life. It has appeared in motion pictures, TV shows, and even music videos. It has even been said to have contributed to the growth of the fast food business. So, starting with its history. Two guys, Walter Anderson and Edgar Waldo Billy Ingram, founded a tiny burger joint in Wichita, Kansas in 1921. White Castle was the name that Ingram came up with. Because the jungle meat was experiencing some public relations issues following the shocking exposé published by Upton Sinclair, Ingram chose the word white because he believed it signified purity. Castle was chosen because it suggested stability and strengths are what people genuinely desire in a decent burger. The Chicago Water Tower, one of the few buildings to have survived the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, was the inspiration for Ingram and Anderson's initial design. Conveniently, the outcomes resembled a little White Castle. The total cost of the property was $700, which is about equal to $11,000 in today's money. Now, Ingram first intended to enter the insurance industry, but he changed his mind after being persuaded by Anderson that America was going to acquire a craving for hamburgers. Although today it would seem obvious, at the time hamburgers weren't all that popular in the US. Some people think Walt Anderson, who is credited with creating the hamburgers we know it today, really flattened a meatball with a spatula after becoming dissatisfied with it during cooking. That might or might not be true. Without a doubt, White Castle can take credit for starting America's enduring love affair with hamburgers. For comparison, 5-cent hamburgers or sliders were sold by the sack at the first White Castle. Today, 5 cents is about 70 cents equivalent. Fast food began wherein every slider was prepared to precise standards and swiftly delivered. There is no doubt that Kansas no longer has a White Castle. Sadly, Kansas hasn't had one in 85 years, despite being the state where the company was first established. The business, which is still owned by the Ingram family and does not provide franchises, relocated to Columbus, the state capital of Ohio, in 1933. Early White Castle restaurants were rather tiny, which limited the amount of seating they could provide. The business chose to promote the concept of carryout to address this issue. Sliders and bags sold by White Castle and packaged in cardboard boxes to keep them warm, a practice that has become its trademark. White Castles began selling their burgers in branded boxes somewhere in the 1930s. These boxes were coated with a unique coating that stopped the oil from the sliders from seeping through the carton. Maurice Benny Benfer, a White Castle employee who later rose to the position of Vice President of Public and Human Communications, created this unique carton. It's important to note that they were the first fast food chain to offer coupons through newspapers. On June 3, 1932, a coupon for White Castle first appeared in a newspaper in St. Louis. If you recall, at the time, its hamburgers were priced at 5 cents each, so it gave customers a carry-out order of 5 for a total of 10 cents. Therefore, this was a fairly excellent deal. According to all accounts, the coupon was a huge success and attracted a ton of new customers, but more significantly, it revolutionized restaurant marketing for good. The general public must have shared this opinion as well. As you can see, the coupons were useful to more than just consumers. By keeping track of how many coupons from each campaign were used, they also enabled the business to determine whether or not its marketing campaigns were successful. Although it now seems like common knowledge, this was avant-garde knowledge at the time. After its establishment, White Castle developed quickly, at least up to World War II, when restrictions on the amount of meat that could be consumed made the burger business a bit more challenging. While the United States fought the Nazis, further growth had to be halted, and existing locations had to hire women for the first time because the majority of the boys had enlisted. The war also proved to be a boost to one side. Ingram had started to support White Castle. You see, Ingram wanted his locations to be inexpensive to build and easy to dismantle. To this end, in 1934, he started the White Castle subsidiary business of making lightweight porcelain and steel structures that would house future White Castle locations. However, once the Second World War came around, PSB, like many businesses, found a better way to contribute, namely by manufacturing amphibious vehicles for the Army. So whatever else you may think about the delicious White Castle, you've got to respect a slider that helped to defeat Hitler. White Castle's been around for a while, so the unfamiliar may ask what makes their slider so distinctive. The original White Castle slider recipe called for cooking little balls of ground beef and then topping them with fresh onion dice. The balls were then turned over after being flattened. However, these days, the sliders are prepared by laying 3 dozen frozen beef patties on a griddle soaked in water and a mountain of rehydrated onions. The completed slider is then served on a bun with a pickle. This is due to the slider switch from frying to steaming onions. Why is that? Well, mainly because the patties may cook more quickly due to steaming. By the way, these patties aren't your typical beef patties. They don't need to be flipped since they have tiny holes punched into them. Without turning, the burger may be topped with the bread while it's still cooking, enabling the onion steam to flavor both the meat and the bun. The simple tweak Earl Howell, a co-worker, recommended in 1954 is what gives White Castle sliders their utterly distinctive flavor. If you've ever had sliders somewhere other than White Castle, or if you like the 1995 sci-fi television series Sliders starring Jerry O'Connell, you know that sliders are more than simply little hamburgers. Tactically speaking, sliders have to be steamed while lying on a mound of onions. Then you probably think the word is spelled S-L-I-D-E-R-S, but at White Castle you would be wrong. To make the name trademarkable, the folks at White Castle decided to spell the word with a Y, S-L-Y-D-E-R-S. If you didn't know that, don't feel bad, pretty much no one does. The popularity of White Castles among vegetarians and vegans is one of the most unexpected aspects of the restaurant. The challenging slider is one of the causes, right? You see, back in 2017, White Castle started working on a plant-based burger that vegans and vegetarians could substitute for the standard beef patty found on a White Castle slider. This was done by reaching out to the nice guys at Impossible Foods. The same company that had assisted Burger King in creating the Impossible Whopper a year earlier was undoubtedly up to the task. The Impossible Slider was on the menu at 140 White Castle restaurants in New York, New Jersey, and Chicago after 18 months of development. It was just a test, but it was a massive success, possibly thanks to the lunch parties that the company threw, which featured celebrities like Questlove and the Wu-Tang Clan. White Castle doesn't give out exact sales figures. It claims it sold more than twice as many Impossible Sliders in the test market than it originally hoped for. So the test must have satisfied them because the Impossible Slider is now available nationwide. There's also a veggie slider made from soybeans, carrots, and peas, among other things, and it's said to be pretty good. The majority of fast food restaurants have worked to increase their menu selection over time. This has resulted in a huge variety of new slider varieties for White Castle, among other things. For instance, a fish slider substitutes a fish fillet for the burger, a surf and turf slider combines a fish fillet with a standard burger, and a chicken ring slider substitutes a ring-shaped piece of chicken for the burger. Features a memorable scene where John Travolta's Tony Manero scuffs down some White Castle burgers with friends at a now no longer operational restaurant in Bayside, Brooklyn. But of course, the most famous pop culture reference to White Castle has to be the 2004 movie. White Castle's then director of marketing said, "There is something authentic in the way the script described how people feel about our distinctive taste and the places they'll go to. We're not going to say that Krispy Kreme made the worst marketing decision since M&M refused to let Steven Spielberg use their product as E.T.'s favorite candy, but it was not a good call." So there you have it, the story of the original slider, a small burger with a big impact on American culture. So next time you're looking for a delicious and affordable